Hi there, I'm Seb Maley from Qdos, and in this video we'll do a bit of a roundup of the key events to have happened in 2024. It's been an interesting year with plenty of twists and turns, with perhaps the headline being a change in government and Labour being back in a hot seat for the first time in 14 years. But before we touch on that, let's have a look at some other areas that are worthy of comment. Firstly, IR35 cases. In April 2024, we saw the third anniversary of the reform to IR35 in the private sector, which pushed responsibility for status from the worker to the engager. This hasn't, however, stopped HMRC's pursuit of individuals under the old rules, and we had a number of long-running cases hitting the tribunal system over the last 12 months. It's been well publicised that HMRC have spent a long time targeting relatively high-profile individuals, particularly TV, radio and sports presenters, and this continued in 2024. Adrian Childs, the rugby commentator Stuart Barnes and football pundit Neil McCann all had cases heard at tribunals to varying degrees of success. More recently, a case involving Gary Lineker was listed for a upper tribunal hearing, but it became apparent that he had settled out of court with HMRC. Whether this means he agreed to pay any tax is not known, but it seems to have put an end to his IR35 saga. With the reformed version of the rules, HMRC have also been pretty busy, and there are a number of open checks into large private sector businesses. These are running pretty slowly, but it's clear that HMRC are not resting on their laurels when it comes to policing the legislation. Away from IR35 specifically, one major case this year was a long-running argument involving football referees and their governing body PGMOL. The case was based around whether the referees, who were operated as sole traders alongside other full-time jobs, were genuinely self-employed or not. And whilst it was heard at the Supreme Court in 2023, the result wasn't released until over a year later in September 2024. The case has been remitted back to a first-tier tribunal to be reheard, meaning there is potentially no end in sight, but the Supreme Court did make some important clarifications around how status is determined, which will be used by HMRC and taxpayers going forward. Another legislation of note is the Managed Service Company, or MSC rules, which lay pretty dormant for a number of years, but concerningly were dusted off by HMRC in 2019. HMRC have focused on two firms of contractor accountants and have started MSC investigations into a couple of thousand of these businesses. Whilst we haven't had any major updates in 2024, we expect the cases to be heard at tribunal at some point in the not-too-distant future, and clearly all of those caught up in the litigation will be hoping for a positive resolution. Turning back to the general election in July, we obviously had several months of campaigning, debates and manifestos before polling day. The manifestos were actually pored over to see if they contained anything of note, but unfortunately any mention of IR35 was notably absent from Labour's pledges. In fact, the only party who pledged a repeal of the IR35 rules was Reform UK. As we know, Labour were ultimately victorious, and whilst they have still not spoken about I-35, they do have plans to simplify the wider world of employment status, which could potentially have a knock-on effect, and hopefully one which will be positive. At the end of October, we had Labour's first budget. Whilst there was little of note for self-employed people or those working through their own limited company, there were a couple of announcements which will impact contractors working through umbrella companies, of which there are significantly more now as a result of the I-35 reforms. One of the major announcements was the government's hike in employers' national insurance, which will come into effect in April 2025. Whilst the government made a play on the fact that this wouldn't be a tax on working people, the reality for umbrella workers is that any increase in tax, whether for employees or employers, will ultimately come out of their pocket. Labour also announced some legislative reforms for umbrella companies in general, which are designed to cut out non-compliance and tax avoidance or evasion, an issue which has been prevalent for a long time in the umbrella world. From April 2026, recruitment agencies and hirers will bear responsibility for the correct application of taxes where an umbrella company is involved in the chain, which the government will hope will eradicate nefarious firms and schemes from targeting the contracting industry. So there was plenty of change in 2024, and there'll be plenty more to watch out for as we head into 2025. We'll keep you fully updated, so please subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you next time.